Everyone knows the legend, a lonely mountain pass. 300 of history's most formidable warriors, holding a line against an army so vast it was said to drink rivers dry. For 3 days, they do the impossible, a glorious, defiant sacrifice for freedom that echoes through eternity. It's a story that has defined heroism for 2,500 years, immortalized in art, film, and folklore. It is the ultimate tale of courage against impossible odds. But what if the story you know is only part of the truth? What if the real reason 300 Spartans fought at Thermopylae was far more complex a story, not just of bravery, but of religious obligation, political compromise, and a desperate, calculated military gamble? What if their famous last stand was never meant to be a last stand at all? To understand why King Leonidas and his 300 made their stand, we have to peel back the layers of myth. We have to look past the legend to uncover a story of a civilization facing annihilation, a king bound by law and prophecy, and a strategic decision that, while ending in defeat, would ultimately help save Western civilization. The coming storm, the strategic context. Our story begins in 480 BCE with an empire hungry for revenge. A decade earlier, the mighty Persian Empire under King Darius had tried to conquer Greece and failed, humiliated by the Athenians at the Battle of Marathon. Now his son, Xerxes I, was on the throne, and he was determined to finish what his father started. He wouldn't just punish Athens and Sparta. He would absorb all of Greece into his colossal empire. It's hard to grasp the sheer scale of Xerxes' ambition and the terror it inspired. He amassed the largest invasion force the ancient world had ever seen. The historian Herodotus claimed it was over 5 million strong, a number modern historians find highly exaggerated. But even conservative estimates put his army between 120,000 and 300,000 soldiers. This wasn't just an army. It was a moving nation, supported by a massive fleet of over 1,000 ships sailing along the coast. And what of Greece? It wasn't one country. It was a volatile collection of over 1,000 fiercely independent and often warring city-states. When news of the Persian invasion spread, a frantic and fragile alliance was formed. This was a coalition of rivals, forced together by a common threat. At its head stood Sparta, recognized as the preeminent military power in Greece. The Persian war machine moved south, swallowing northern Greece with terrifying speed. The Greek alliance knew they couldn't face the Persians on an open plain. They were simply outnumbered. Their only hope was to find a place where geography was their greatest ally, place where the Persian advantage in numbers would mean nothing. They found it at Thermopylae. The name means hot gates, a reference to the hot sulfur springs there. For the Greeks, it was the gateway to their homeland. It was a narrow coastal pass with impassable mountains on one side and the sea on the other, in some places barely wide enough for a single wagon. It was the perfect choke point. Here, a small, determined force could hold off a vastly larger one. But the plan was bigger than just blocking a road. The Battle of Thermopylae was only one half of a coordinated strategy. At the same time, the allied Greek navy, led by the brilliant Athenian politician Themistocles, was positioned at the Straits of Artemisium. It was a delicate dance of land and sea power. The army, under Spartan King Leonidas, would block the Persian army at the hot gates. The navy would block the Persian fleet at Artemisium, preventing them from sailing around the pass and landing troops behind Greek lines. If both positions held, the massive Persian army, unable to be resupplied by its fleet, would eventually starve and be forced to retreat. It was a brilliant, daring plan, but it all depended on a small force holding the line at Thermopylae. The question was, who would hold that line, and why so few? The Spartan dilemma, law, gods, and a desperate gamble. This brings us to the heart of the myth, the number 300. Why? When facing an existential threat, did the mighty state of Sparta send only their king and his personal bodyguard? The popular story frames it as a purely heroic gesture. The reality is rooted in a crisis of religion, law, and politics. First, you have to understand Sparta. It wasn't the freedom-loving society modern fiction often portrays. Sparta was a rigid, militaristic, and deeply conservative state. Its entire social structure was designed for one purpose: to create the perfect soldier and maintain absolute control over their massive population of enslaved people, the Helots. The Spartans lived in constant fear of a Helot uprising, a fear that dictated much of their policy. When Xerxes' invasion began, Sparta found itself in an impossible position. The timing was catastrophic. It was August, and the Spartans were in the middle of their most sacred religious festival, the Carnea, a holy period during which all warfare was strictly forbidden by law. As if that weren't enough, the Olympic Games, a sacred truce for all Greeks, were also underway. To march the full army to war would be a profound act of sacrilege. But to do nothing meant abandoning Greece to be conquered. This sparked a furious political debate. One faction argued for keeping the army at home to honor the gods. Another, led by King Leonidas, argued that the threat was too great to ignore. The solution was a loophole. A brilliant, desperate, legalistic loophole. The law forbade the Spartan army from marching. It did not, however, forbid the king from traveling with his personal royal bodyguard. The Hippies, an elite unit of 300 champions. So, Leonidas would lead an advance force, his own guard, to show the allies that Sparta had not abandoned them. This wasn't a suicide mission. It was a political compromise designed to get some forces in the field immediately, to hold the pass just long enough for the festivals to end. Once they were over, the full Spartan army would march north and reinforce the position. Adding another layer of grim reality was a prophecy from the oracle at Delphi. The oracle had given the Spartans a terrifying choice. Either Sparta itself would be destroyed, or it would have to mourn the death of one of its kings. When Leonidas marched north, he knew what destiny likely awaited him. He famously chose his 300 men from veterans who had already fathered sons, ensuring no Spartan family line would be extinguished. The mission was not a glorious charge, but a somber duty, a calculated sacrifice, and a desperate gamble against time. The forgotten allies, more than just 300. Now we have to address the most pervasive myth of all, the idea that 300 Spartans stood alone. This is a powerful image, but it's false, and it does a great disservice to the thousands of other Greeks who fought and died at Thermopylae. Leonidas and his 300 Spartans were the elite core of the army, but they were part of a much larger allied force. In reality, the total number of Greek soldiers defending the pass was approximately 7,000. This coalition included contingents from all across Greece: 700 Thespians, 400 Thebans, 1,000 Phocians, and thousands more from cities like Corinth, Tegea, and Mantinea. The Spartans also brought Helots with them, who would have served as support troops. Some modern estimates suggest up to 900 may have remained for the final stand. Acknowledging the true size of the army doesn't diminish the Spartans' bravery. It makes the story strategically coherent. A force of 7,000 hoplites, blocking a pass perhaps only 100 feet wide, is a viable military plan, not a suicidal gesture. The goal was to hold the pass with this combined force until the main Greek armies could mobilize after their religious festivals. The focus on the 300 is understandable. They were the professional heart of the army and the ones who made the ultimate sacrifice under their king. But it's crucial to remember the 700 Thespians who voluntarily chose to stay and die with the Spartans, and the other Greeks who fought bravely for 2 full days. The stand at Thermopylae wasn't just a Spartan story. It was a Greek story. The battle re-examined. 3 days in hell. With this new context, let's re-examine the battle. For 3 days in August 480 BCE, the hot gates became the center of the world. When Xerxes arrived, he waited 4 days, assuming the small Greek force would see his army and flee. They didn't. He demanded their surrender, and Leonidas's reply became legendary. Molin Lab, come and get them. On the first day, Xerxes sent in his regular troops, who were slaughtered. The Greeks fought as a phalanx, a wall of overlapping shields and spears. Their heavy bronze armor protected them, while the Persians, with their wicker shields and shorter spears, couldn't get close. After the first wave failed, Xerxes furiously sent in his elite, the 10,000 immortals. They, too, were repulsed with horrific casualties. The first day was a stunning victory for the Greeks. The second day brought more of the same. Wave after wave of Persian infantry threw themselves against the unyielding Greek line and were cut down. The Greeks even feigned retreats to lure the Persians into disorganized charges, only to turn and destroy them. Xerxes was enraged. The small Greek force was holding, buying precious time. But the Greek position had a fatal flaw. A mountain track that went around their position. A local man named Ephialtes, hoping for a reward, betrayed them and showed the path to Xerxes. The Persian king dispatched his immortals to outflank the Greeks. The Phocian troops guarding the path were taken by surprise and fell back, sending a runner to Leonidas with the catastrophic news. They were surrounded. This is the moment that defines Leonidas. His decision was a cold, calculated military choice. He called a council of war. With the pass encircled, the main goal was now to save the army to fight another day. He dismissed the majority of the allied Greeks, ordering them to retreat while there was still time. Their survival was essential for the future defense of Greece. So why did he stay? First, it was a rearguard action. A small force had to cover the retreat of the main army, preventing the Persian cavalry from running them down. Second, there was Spartan law. For a king, retreat was dishonorable. The famous epitaph for the fallen says it all. Go tell the Spartans, stranger passing by, that here, obedient to their laws, we lie. Finally, there was the oracle's prophecy. A king had to die to save Sparta, and he was that king. He was not alone. The 700 Thespians refused to leave, choosing to die with their allies in an incredible act of loyalty. Herodotus reports that Leonidas forced the 400 Thebans to remain, suspecting them of sympathizing with the Persians. The Thebans' role is debated, and some did surrender during the final stand. So on that final morning, the remaining Greeks advanced to inflict as many casualties as possible. They fought with spears until they shattered, then with swords, and finally with their bare hands. Leonidas fell, and a fierce battle raged over his body. In the end, driven back to a small hill, the last defenders were killed by a hail of Persian arrows. The hot gates had fallen. The story of Thermopylae is filled with these complex layers of strategy, law, and human drama. If you find this deep dive into the real history behind the legend fascinating, and you want to uncover more truths about the ancient world, make sure you subscribe and ring the notification bell. You won't want to miss our next investigation into history's greatest myths, the aftermath and the true legacy. In the immediate aftermath, Thermopylae was a catastrophic defeat. Xerxes had his victory. The path south was open, and the Persian army poured through, ultimately burning the evacuated city of Athens. Xerxes ordered the head of Leonidas to be cut off and impaled on a spike. A sign of his fury at the heavy losses his army had sustained, ancient sources claim up to 20,000 men, though modern historians find that number likely inflated. Tactically, the battle was lost. But strategically, Leonidas and his men had succeeded. Their stand was never about winning the battle. It was about buying time. And that is exactly what they did. The 7 days they held the Persians at bay were crucial. That delay had profound consequences. First, it allowed the allied Greek navy at Artemisium to engage the Persian fleet. While the naval battles were indecisive, the Greek fleet withdrew in good order after Thermopylae, preserving its strength for the next fight. Second, the bravery shown at the pass became a powerful rallying cry for all of Greece. It proved that the Persian war machine could be challenged and made to bleed, fostering a sense of unity and resolve. This inspiration paid off just a month later. Themistocles lured the Persian fleet into the narrow straits of Salamis, where the nimbler Greek ships decimated them in one of history's most decisive naval battles. The Battle of Salamis was the war's turning point. With his navy shattered, Xerxes retreated to Asia with the bulk of his army. The following year, at the Battle of Plataea, the combined Greek armies, led by a full Spartan force, crushed the remaining Persians, ending the invasion for good. None of this would have been possible without the sacrifice at Thermopylae. The myth began almost immediately, transforming a brutal defeat into a profound moral victory. The tale of the 300 became a symbol of courage, of sacrifice for the greater good, and of the defense of liberty against tyranny. So, why did 300 Spartans really fight at Thermopylae? They fought because their laws demanded it, their gods had prophesied it, and their king understood was the only strategic option they had left. It wasn't a simple quest for a glorious death. It was a rearguard action to save an army, a political compromise to appease the gods, and a king's fulfillment of a grim prophecy to save his people. The legend of Thermopylae focuses on the glory of 300 men defying a massive army. But the true history is, in many ways, far more compelling. It's a story about leadership and making impossible choices under unimaginable pressure. It reminds us that behind the epic myths are real people, bound by laws, faith, and a desperate hope for survival. The legend tells us how to die bravely. The history tells us how a tactical defeat can pave the way for an ultimate victory that changes the course of the world.